frequency, I think. But Paul MacLean said the brain operates entirely by resonance. What does he mean by resonance? I find that the most mysterious word in the world. Resonance. Well, that's whatever it is that when I come across certain people, I think, oh boy, give me a hug. And others, I'm just not resonant with. So it has to do with emotions. It has to do with electromagnetic energies, and I don't like the term. I would call them forces, which is more realistic. It has to do with a lot of that sort of thing, but the brain puts together its picture through resonance. Bob Monroe, talking about an interesting character, he spoke one time on this highway out of the body. Remember that, what did he call it? Interstate. What? Interstate. The interstate. And you remember he said, well, these people have left their bodies behind, and they're just this, whatever it is that is remaining, going down the interstate highway. He said, you'll see them pulling off these different exits. What pulls them off these different exits? Resonance. Whatever they're most resonant with will attract them, and they'll peel off here and there. Bob, of course, had set himself up in a pretty different category, and I think he was, and he had a perfect right to brag about it. He said, but there are those of us who are not resonant with any of this, really, but only in exploration. We just keep going. And so he didn't find any resonance. Here were the Christians peeling off here, and the Muslims peeling off here, and these and that and the other. None of that attracted Bob. He had no resonance with that. He had resonance only with exploration. And he didn't let you forget that, in case you got hung up on a resonance along the way. So the business of this field, which the heart produces, this frequency realm, is from which the brain puts together its whole picture of our experience in the body of the world. But it's far more than that. And for this, I'm going to drop back to the mid-70s. I met an Indian guru. I had great contempt for gurus at that time. I have an old colleague at the University of California, professor of philosophy, and we spoke with great contempt in the mid-70s of the Guru of the Month Club. Who's the Guru of the Month? That everybody's throwing flower petals in their path and so forth, a different one every month. And I made fun of all this too until my seminar director, I had to hire a seminar director for the Magical Child seminars because I had such an overload of requests to come and give talks on this. I couldn't get the book written. I was trying to write the book, The Magical Child, and I was getting most of my information from audiences. I was too lazy to go into a library, so I just gave talks on it, and from my audiences would come 2 responses, saying I was crazy to mention something such and such. Look up the research of so-and-so, and you'll find that you can't make that statement. Boy, I was scratching it all down. And then some statement I would make and throw it out there on the blackboard, and someone would say, yes, that's just what so-and-so and so on. I put those names down. And so I had both a constant corrective and a marvelous source of information. So I didn't have to fool around with research. People would say to me, how do you have time to do all that research? All I was doing is going around and yakking, and it all came in. But at any rate, now what was that apropos of? My seminar director had been one of Werner Erhardt's main forces, managing all this stuff for Werner Erhard. She came to a Magical Child seminar. She quit her job with Werner, and she said, I'm going to take over this, whether you can pay me or not. We've got to get this message out. She was quite enthusiastic about it all. But, and she started, we were finally booked up a whole year ahead. And then she came back one day. She lived up in Oakland. I was down in about 100 miles south. And she came back and said she had just met this incredible guru from India and wanted me to meet him. She later reported that I got so disgusted with her, she was afraid to mention it again because she was sure I'd fire her from her job. A guru. Well, as things went on right over here in my little hand-built cabin, and by the way, it wasn't at the end of Rainbow Ridge. There was no Rainbow Ridge. When I built over there, there was no road. And this whole property, we had to come in through the Smith Brothers farm over here, and there were no power lines, no telephone lines. That's why I chose that little 5-acre plot. And I got it when Hunter Moyer owned the property, before Bob bought it from Hunter Moyer. And so that little 5-acre plot had an interesting history. I don't know what that was all about, but the sitting right there in that little house of mine, we didn't have electricity, had only these oil lamps, Aladdin lamps they call them. They were they give about a 40-watt glow, wonderful things. And I'd just gotten in through the mail, and I had no mailing address. Only my publisher had my mailing address, so they could send me any checks that might come along. But I wouldn't have to bother with ordinary mail. Well, I didn't get much of either one, as it turns out. But someone had sent me a copy of a book by this Muktananda. And I wrinkled up my nose when my seminar director talked about him several years before. Wouldn't have anything to do with it. And here, about 3 years later, happily lost to the world over here on what would be Rainbow Ridge, and I did nothing but meditate. I meditated and gardened and waited for a royalty check to keep the police away. And I had really 3 years of most incredible meditation experiences. I'd picked up this meditation practice from a thing going on in the West Coast, and when I quit the world and swore I would never again pay a penny of tax money in my life, and settle down there to nothing but meditating and gardening and hoping a check would come from the publisher in time to keep me out of jail, my family and myself. And here came a book called Play of Consciousness. And working on the chapter play in my book, Magical Child, on the top of this little mountain in the Santa Cruz Mountains, overlooking Silicon Valley, a little place the Jesuits had given me to finish my book, Magical Child. I'd had this incredible experience on the issue of play, and it was such an enormous experience that I finished up Magical Child right quick, took my advance money from E.P. Dutton, gave him the manuscript of Magical Child, and disappeared. And left no forwarding address to anyone. And to my seminar director, Nancy Brown, I went up and I'd given her full power of attorney over the title, Magical Child. She could have all the seminar stuff and all of our equipment and files and so on and so forth. I was leaving. And I had no forwarding address. And it was a great blow to Nancy. She tried to make it work, but she couldn't. And it had to do with this